And the Thunder here, and today we are going to be getting into my spoiler review for the 7th installment in the Mission Impossible franchise, Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1. To start off, let's look at my expectations. Going into this movie, my expectations were that the trend of the movies getting better and better with each release would continue. In other words, going into this, I was really hoping that this would be the best Mission Impossible movie yet. And when I got out of it, there's definitely a lot to sink in, and this review is being recorded as a first reaction to this movie. So there's still a lot to sink in, and I'm definitely going to want to rewatch it again when it comes out on 4K so that I can truly evaluate my opinion on the film. But right now, my expectations didn't disappoint. So far, this is wrestling with Fallout as being the best installment in the Mission Impossible franchise. There are a few flaws that jumped out at me when watching this on first viewing, but not a whole lot. And don't worry, I will get into these flaws, but so far, I really enjoyed this movie. So let's jump right into the beginning of this movie. So the movie opens on a submarine passing through the oceans. It's an undetected submarine piloted by the Russians that exceeded all their expectations as being one of the best submarines, which is some nice referencing to The Hunt from Red October, with Red October being the Russians' best submarine. And the reason why it's the Russians' best submarine is all thanks to an AI programming implemented into the submarine, which I will now refer to as the Entity. But then, on their radar, they see an enemy sub that fires a torpedo at them, so they try to fire a torpedo back, and they brace for impact when the torpedo coming towards their way is about to hit them, but it doesn't hit them because there was no torpedo, and the torpedo that the Russian sub launched that was headed towards the submarine that fired this torpedo headed for them, that also disappeared, and that's because the enemy submarine never existed. However, the real torpedo fired by the real submarine made a U-turn and headed right for that real submarine. They tried to destroy the torpedo, but it didn't work. Eventually, the torpedo hit the back of the submarine, and they all went down, with all the bodies being risen up, including the bodies of 2 naval officers, each one of them with half a key wrapped around their neck on a chain, which becomes a primary plot point for this movie that I will address in due course. We then fade over to Ethan Hunt as he's being delivered another message, and I just love the way that the scene is cinematographed. I'm gonna get into the cinematography right now. This movie is presented, edited, shot, and scored to beautiful results. And the introduction scene to Hunt in this movie is no exception. I love the way it's shot. I love the way he steps out into the shadows. And that's another thing. There's an incredible focus within shadows and silhouettes in this film, contrasting light, that it's just beautiful to watch on IMAX. Anyways, after the shadowy shot introduction, the package is delivered and he gets a message informing him about the 2 key halves that he needs to find. And one of them belongs to his friend from the previous 2 movies, Ilsa, who is currently on the run from some bounty hunters somewhere in Africa, from what I remember. So then Ethan Hunt goes there, but is rumbled by the bounty hunters who start shooting at him and start heading for Ilsa, and it's just a beautifully shot action scene with the sandstorm coming in, Ilsa taking out the bounty hunters one by one using her sniper rifle, and the scene eventually leads to Ilsa's apparent death from the mercenaries. And it awkwardly fades right into the CIA offices, and I found this a pretty awkward transition on my first viewing, because they fade right from the shock of Ilsa's supposed death all the way to the CIA offices, which leaves it kind of lingering and takes you out of the next scene where they're giving exposition on how dangerous the key is. But anyways, we learn from the CIA that the reason why they know that this key is important is because no country, not even their closest allies, gave them any tips on how to get it, meaning that every country is on the race to recover this lost key because they know that with the key, they can plug it into the entity and its AI mindset and do wonders with it. And within that same exposition scene, Hunt gives his boss a gas mask as he launches it into the room and knocks out all the other world leader officials and reveals himself to the audience. And it's kind of a fan service moment right there. We learn from Ethan's boss that this key is going to cost him dearly and that he would have to pick a side for this mission because every country was going to be on the race for that key. It was going to be an inevitability. And so Hunt responds by saying that he's already picked a side. He's picked a side for the better of the world. And then he makes the decision to pursue the two halves of the key. And we then later reveal that Ilsa is not actually dead, which made me actually pretty relieved when I first saw it. But again, I still find that edit pretty awkward. But then after that, Hunt knocks his boss out. He disappears. A security barges in. And we jump right into the film's title sequence, and I can say it is by far the best title sequence I've seen for the Mission Impossible series thus far. The score is absolutely epic, and that's another really big positive for this film. The score is definitely the best since MI6 Fallout. It is absolutely epic. It's very moving in places. It's just a joy to watch in the IMAX theater. We then rejoin the narrative with Hunt in the airport as he's pursuing that half of the key, and he's looking for a female thief that has it as he does so. However, there's also a bag that comes here in the mix, and this is where things get a little fancy. So Benji, under Luther's orders, goes and gets the bag and finds that there's a bomb in it, and he has to solve a multitude of riddles and true or false questions to get it. And there's a really tense puzzle on the last part where he has to look for a specific combination within the box that's already being formed as a result to find the answer. And already on that box before he does the riddles is "You are done," and done is Benji's last name, meaning that they already know that they're on this mission. Meanwhile, Hunt is also being pursued by the CIA as well as he's looking for the thief, and he does get to the thief, but then the female thief slips from under his skin as Hunt is distracted with the atomic bomb. It's a pretty tense scene as the CIA is looking for them, and they stumble across the wrong people, and they try to tug at their faces only to find that they're real faces and not the masks that Ethan Hunt wears. And eventually, the mission is rumbled. Hunt fails to get on the same plane as the female thief, who we learn goes by the name of Grace, and Hunt has to board the next plane and contact the authorities of where she's going to, and he has to make a narrow escape on a roof from the CIA. And from that narrow escape, he's running across the roof, there's action pumping, and then it does another awkward fade right into the scene where the CIA is trying to track down both Hunt and Grace. Then after that, we get right into the scene where it reveals that Grace has a record of thievery on her, which we already saw in the airport scene, but she's now been arrested for it as a result of Hunt calling her. And then she's called into the library after an attempted interrogation, and Hunt poses as her lawyer, and Hunt tells her, hey, I'll pay you, but you gotta get me to the half of the key that I need for the mission. And then Grace tries to escape from him in a car, and Hunt pursues her by motorcycle, but then Grace crashes the car, and now the police are on her. But also, another party that's also looking for the key is also on Hunt's tail, as well as the police and the CIA. And that party I will now refer to as Gabriel's party. The plot is pretty fuzzy, and I know I'm stuttering a lot because I didn't really write a script or any notes to help me comprehend, but whatever. So Hunt is able to get into the same car as Grace, and they're eventually cornered by both the police, the CIA, and Gabriel's party. And then they're stuck in a tight shootout situation where all the parties are shooting out at each other, and Grace tries to escape, but Hunt handcuffs her and him together with the bracelets that were tossed by the CIA guys, and Hunt and Grace have to escape. The handcuffs were a nice callback to Tomorrow Never Dies with that chase. And then they get into the car and they rip open the car doors. It's very exciting. It's well choreographed, very, very visceral. It was wonderful seeing it into the theaters until I began to get out of it, because they then decide to switch cars and they come across that small yellow car that was a pretty on-the-nose reference from For Your Eyes Only. And the on-the-nose reference wasn't the part that bothered me most. What bothered me the most is that they made that scene on the nose by dragging it out way too long with several jokes regarding the car. They don't know how to operate it. It's a small car. They can't go straight. It does succeed in taking the stakes out of the situation a bit, especially considering that the bad guys don't catch up with them until the last minute. But then we get into the next part where they're going on an underpass and there's cars on both sides, and the only way they can get out is through a tunnel that takes them to a subway. And this is where the scene gets tense and visceral and exciting again, because they land in the path of a subway and Hunt is handcuffed to the wheel as a result of Grace, and Grace abandons him, and then the train comes up, and another awkward edit comes into this movie where Hunt is trying to get his handcuff away from the wheel and the train's coming, and then we go from him still seated in the car trying to get that handcuff out of there. We go from that to all of a sudden he's teleported away from the train as he's managed to tug the wheel out from him. That was another pretty awkward edit I found there. After that, though, he's rescued by Benji and Luther, and they go undercover, and Ilsa is also there to aid him on the mission, and they have to go to this party in Venice. But before they do, there's a really nice moment between Ilsa and Hunt on the balcony overlooking the view of Venice, where Ilsa says that she's never been to Venice and she's really beginning to resonate with this new life, the life of working for the IMF, and which is some really nice and subtle foreshadowing for what's to come later of her character, even if I found it a little underwhelming, but we'll get to that later. So then they go to the party where they meet up with Gabriel and the dealer party that's trying to sell them out the key. They go upstairs to talk, and Gabriel tells him that Hunt needs to live, but one of the females, either Ilsa or Grace, need to die for his plan to work. And Hunt goes in and warns Gabriel that if he does that, then there's no place that I won't go to kill you. Which is also a really nice moment from Hunt's arc in this movie, as we later find out that in order for Hunt to beat out the entity, Gabriel cannot die. But then it leads into the next action scene, which I also found really spectacularly done. From cinematography to score to sound design, it was just amazing. From Hunt being chased to the entity hacking into Benji's voice comms. The voice comms were always reliable in the previous films, but here it gives off that feeling of uncertainty, like nothing is safe. Nothing is certain anymore, and Hunt finds out that he's eventually been tricked and that he's far away from the bridge and he won't get there in time. Hunt runs there just as Grace and then Ilsa duel it out with swords and daggers on the bridge. Right when Gabriel is about to finish off Grace, Ilsa steps in and distracts Gabriel as they have their sword fight, and then, and this is the big spoiler here, Gabriel succeeds in the fight and manages to kill Ilsa, and I found this death kind of anticlimactic in the theaters. While I think that Tom Cruise really sold it well on the pain of failing to save Ilsa from Gabriel, the writing doesn't give him too much room for emotion. We do see him earlier before Ilsa's death that he doesn't accept that the mission is more important than any of the lives of his team, but other than that, I just felt left kind of iffy. I'm definitely going to need a second watch to establish that for myself, but yeah, I do think it was done pretty alright, although I was a little disappointed with it on first viewing, but whatever. I really like how paralleling the hopeful shot for Ilsa is paired with a gloomy shot of Ethan Hunt looking out the balcony, and the team as well is in despair. Grace feels guilt over the fact that Ilsa sacrificed herself to save her, and Luther had to remind her that Ilsa wasn't dead because of Grace. Grace was alive because of Ilsa, and Ilsa would have wanted Grace to continue fighting for the cause of the IMF. And as a result, they realize that they have to get the key back through a train heading through the mountains of Austria, and the team is more determined than ever to right the wrongs of the previous night, and thus they get to work under making the mask, one for Grace and one for Hunt, and Grace is only willing to go out on the train and do the mission on condition that Hunt goes as well, Unfortunately, though, the mask maker that Benji uses, while it successfully made the mask meant for Grace to pose as the dealer that's going to be selling out the key, it fried out on Hunt's mask, meaning that Hunt is going to have to find another way to get on a train, specifically using a motorcycle to get on the train once it slows down. While the first phase of the plan worked well, that being Grace posing as the seller of the key, the second phase did not, as Gabriel sees ahead and attacks the train driver and positions it so that the train can't be stopped no matter what action they take, which is done so that once Gabriel gets what he needs, the bridge that the train will head onto can blow up right in front of the train and kill everybody inside, thus getting rid of any evidence of the deal ever having gone down. Why Hunt can't get on the train and he has to find another way with the help of Benji, as they're able to get onto a frequency that doesn't require satellites to be able to communicate. And Benji finds another way, which does require, and Hunt is taken aback by the sheer size of the stunt, and he's like, no, I can't do this. And Benji's like, no, you gotta do this, it's the only way, like, you gotta do this. And the theater cracked up at that part, although I actually found it pretty tense on my first viewing, so the theater did also crack up on the bit of comedy involving the small yellow card that I didn't really care for. So I guess I do kind of disagree with the reaction to the audience in this movie, but I digress. Hunt manages to drive his motorcycle right off the cliff in an absolutely, definitely, spectacularly breathtaking stunt, because the suspense, the tension, the build-up, the payoff, it is all right there within that stunt, and it is just amazing to watch. But back to the deal on the train. The deal almost goes through, but then Grace declines to transfer the money that's meant to go to the buyer, and she escapes, although, right as she does, the real seller of the key walks in, and the men realize that they have to go after the fake one. Meanwhile, through all this, there's been interaction between Gabriel and another political guy whose name I can't remember. I'm gonna have to watch this on second viewing, but they're trying to go through a deal where they're able to use the entity system once they bring it under control through the keys to be able to use it to revolutionize the American military and become the strongest country within the world, and that he needs to stay alive because only he knows where the key is plugged in. With that information, however, Gabriel decides to kill the man in a surprisingly dark fashion, using scissors to cut open his throat. That surprised me a little when I first saw the film. I was like, I wasn't expecting it to be that dark, but then it leads to Grace being caught with the key and she's forced to put it down on the table, but even so, the henchmen decide to kill her, and that's right when Hunt crashes into the train with his parachute in a really awesome moment that made me want to jump out of my seat with a heck yeah in the theater. There are some tense moments where the parachute is threatening to pull him off the train, but thankfully he's able to let go, and they realize that they have to stop this train and get all the passengers on the back. But while Grace tries to get to the front of the train and stop it, Hunt pursues Gabriel, who has the key, and they duel it out right on the train. And right when Hunt is about to kill Gabriel, despite his knowledge of where the key is put in, especially because of his knowledge of where the key is put in. But then he's cornered by the two CIA guys that have been pursuing him the entire movie. And despite Hunt's warnings that Gabriel is the guy they want, they don't heed them, and Gabriel is able to escape by jumping onto a truck parked at a railroad crossing, and they escape. But when he does reach into his pocket for the key, he instead finds the cigarette lighter, the same cigarette lighter that has been shown by Hunt throughout the movie. As Grace tries to give Hunt the cigarette lighter, saying that she doesn't smoke, it pops up a couple more times in the movie. Setup and payoff. And I love the moment where Gabriel, in response to finding that he doesn't have a key, he just screams, "Hi!" I absolutely love that moment. And then upon realizing that there's no way that they can stop the train and that the bridge that the train is about to head onto is about to blow up, they have to uncouple the cars so that the train can lose momentum. They're able to uncouple the cars, the bridge blows up, and the coal car and engine car crash immediately right into them. And then there's a few more cars the characters have to climb through, which they escape. God, I just love this hangnail of an action scene. They have to transform from car to car. There's some really tense moments where they're hanging and everything. They have to get out. But when they're in the last car that's about to go off the cliff, this is where the action scene gets kind of lame, is that they go right from hanging from the bar when all of a sudden the buyer pops in and decides to save them. And right when the car's about to go loose, they grab on, they pull each other up, but then when the car finally breaks loose, they're standing there as if they hadn't just escaped. That was another really awkward edit I found in this movie. And again, it does sound pretty stuttery the way I present it, but you might find it when you watch this movie. But anyway, so them dying, the blonde girl whose name I can't remember warns Hunt of the power that the key possesses, and that there's good reason for them to continue pursuing it. It leads right into the end of this movie where Hunt tells Grace that she has a choice to either continue being pursued by the authorities or join the IMF to work off her crimes for the rest of her life. And I really like the monologue that caps out the movie, saying that even though the premise of joining the IMF in reality would lead to great danger that could possibly mean a lie for whoever joins it, they still had to anyways, because if they didn't do anything, the entity would win. And it's still pretty fuzzy, but that sort of ending left me really blown away with this movie, and in a good way. Alright, it's time to wrap this up. Mission Impossible 7 was definitely a great action as well as a great political thriller. However, there are a few flaws that keep it from being a perfect Mission Impossible movie in my eyes, now that it's had time to sink in. The first of those two things is the awkward editing in places, which I've already mentioned. It definitely could have been edited better. The other thing was Ilsa's death, which I found kind of underwhelming and undercooked. Now, if it's revealed in the next movie that she wasn't actually dead and was faking her death for the sake of the mission and getting Grace over to their side, then I would actually roll with that pretty well. Unfortunately, though, it's kind of left lingering, and not in a good way. So while my heart wants to give it 5 stars, the flaws keep it from being that way for me now. So right now, I feel safe giving it 4.5 out of 5 stars. Who knows? Maybe it will shoot back up to 5 stars. I'm definitely going to need a second watch, possibly back to back along with Fallout, to truly evaluate my opinion on the film. But I definitely can't wait for part 2, and I can't wait to hear what you guys have to say about it in the comments section. And more crucially, I would like to be filled in on plot details that I didn't get right, and believe me, I'm sure that there's plenty of them, but leave a like if you enjoyed the review, and consider subscribing so that you don't miss out on possibly more review content that's coming up on this channel, which could possibly include Oppenby. No, I meant Oppenheimer. Yeah, I could possibly include that, but anyways, thanks a lot for watching. I'll see you in the next one, so long for now.